On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we're going to talk about the players who have been placed on waivers ahead of the final rosters being due today at 5 p.m. We are going to discuss where the Panthers stand as far as the salary cap. We're going to also discuss Mackenzie Weegar signing an extension with the Calgary Flames just this past weekend. And we're going to discuss the latest in the Hockey Canada investigation, all on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, October 10th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MonoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Rodent and Locked On NHL. Will be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. So, Cats fans, the Florida Panthers finished 2-4-0 in the preseason, but we don't really focus too much on preseason records as far as the direction that we want to see this team go. We just want to see these players develop great habits and, of course, work together. Of course, get some rest for Panthers players who you don't want to see them in meaningless hockey games, especially towards the tail end of the preseason. But the Florida Panthers did get a few players back at practice today at FLA Live Arena. That's where today's practice is being held. The Panthers, let's first start off with Matthew Kuchak. He's back with the team. It is with a line of Sam Bennett and Rudolph Balcers, who, hey, Rudolph Balcers got another goal on Saturday's game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, even though it was in a losing effort. Alexei Heponiemi got a goal, which was deflected off a Tampa Bay Lightning skater. And we'll talk a little bit about Alexei Heponiemi a little bit later in this segment. But Patrick Hornquist was also back. And last week he was wearing a non-contact jersey for the Panthers. Now he's wearing a regular practice jersey. So any players, any fans that were looking for LTIR space for Patrick Hornquist going into this season, it was never going to be a thing because he was at least skating. The only indication that would have led me to believe that there would have been any LTIR space for Patrick Hornquist would have been if he wasn't even on the ice at all. It'd have to be that extreme of a situation for Patrick Hornquist. So those players have returned to the ice, but there have been a few players who have been placed on waivers for the Cats as they make their last round of cuts. Rosters are due at 5 p.m. on Monday. We'll find out whether these players that I'm about to list will clear waivers at 2 p.m. today. And the following players have been placed on waivers for the Panthers: center Chris Tierney, forward Gerald Mayhew, goalie Alex Lyon, defenseman Michael Delzato, Lucas Carlson, defenseman, and forward Alexei Heponiemi. And Logan Hutsko was sent down to the minors, who is waivers exempt according to Cap Friendly. But the surprising ones are mostly Lucas Carlson and Alexei Heponiemi. Alexei Heponiemi having a great preseason, getting 3 goals in the preseason and having a chance to make the roster. But this is something that the Florida Panthers this season specifically were always going to struggle with as far as fitting players on the roster. And sometimes we even spoke about with the salary cap being at a flat cap that players who are making lower level salaries are going to be the guys who are squeezed out, unfortunately. And we're even seeing that with veteran players like an Eric Stahl. And the Panthers, I have a belief that they want to keep him, but where they are right now, according to Cap Friendly, their total cap hit before this last round of cuts, it's going to be more clear by today at 5 p.m. Right now, they stand at 91, just over 91 million. You take out the salaries of 6 of the players, along with Logan Hutsko as well. The Panthers barely fit over. They're actually a little over the salary cap if you actually subtract Anthony Duclair's LTIR space too, because everyone makes 750K of this group with the exception of Lucas Carlson, who makes 800K, and Logan Hutsko, he's still on an ELC too. So that is just you're right at the cap ceiling for this team, and Eric Stahl is also not at practice today for the Panthers. So this could mean one of two things: cut, or he's negotiating a deal which might get the Panthers to make another transaction. I don't so that is a situation where the Florida Panthers kind of they're kind of in a tough situation, and that was always going to be the case with Yandel's buyout and Scott Darling's last year as being part of the dead cap for the Panthers. But there are a few players who are still around for the Panthers. Justin Sordiff is around still. It's funny because on Wine Wednesday last week, when we were discussing Justin Sordiff and getting some game action under his belt, he himself, Justin Sordiff, was talking about how he's getting a few skates in before being sent down. So he kind of confirmed himself that he was being sent down. But what are the chances that he improved so much throughout these last few days that convinced Paul Maurice saying that, hey, I want him to be a part of this team? And Carter Hagee skated for a little bit this morning and then eventually left, and Justin Sordiff was filled as part of Barkov's left wing and in today's practice. So what are the chances that Justin Sordiff makes the team? Zach Dalpe hasn't been sent back down ever since being called back up for the Panthers, but he's not at practice neither for the Cats. As far as the guys who are there right now tweeting out, I didn't see Zach Dalpe's name for the Panthers, and Matt Kiersted's not at practice neither. But Matt Kierstead was not part of the waivers yesterday for the Panthers. So is Matt Kierstead officially going to be the 6th defenseman for the Panthers? And chances are looking more likely that he could be. As far as the players on waivers, I don't see Chris Tierney being claimed. Mayhew, Lyon, Michael Dozado. The two players that we really need to really keep an eye on is Lucas Carlson and Alexi Heponiemi. And I think it's less likely that Carlson of the two will get claimed. Honestly, I'm 75% sure. This is just a random number that I'm putting out there. 75% sure that Alexi Heponiemi won't be claimed. And something that George Richards spoke about on his latest article from Florida Hockey Now about the latest waivers that the Panthers were on is seeing teams that are rebuilding that could take a flyer on a player that is kind of a fringe roster player that could be part of the everyday lineup for another rebuilding team. I'm not gonna name the team from that article because, of course, want to encourage you guys to read the article by George Richards of Florida Hockey Now. So a chance for those teams that are rebuilding, for them to get a chance to claim a player like Alexi Heponiemi. But it's a risk that Bill Zito's taking, that's for sure, and Paul Maurice, that they could eventually lose him for nothing. Not saying that they haven't really any trade value, really, because they're right now they haven't proven themselves yet as far as being consistent stays on the team. But it's a risk that they're taking. And Eric Stahl, if they find a way to sign him and fit him under the cap and an Alexei Heponiemi and Lucas Carlson gets claimed, I don't know how happy I'll be. I really don't know. And this front office has done a really great job the last now 3 off seasons for the Panthers. But this might be this might be a very questionable move for this front office if they allow a 37-year-old veteran who didn't play in the NHL last season, possibly allow him to block another player who has many years of hockey in front of them. And I don't know how well it would sit for me, honestly, with that. So really, it's a wait and see game right now for us and the rest of this Panthers team, that we could very well see one thing or the other. I don't have a crystal ball to really say, because they're really up against the cap. It's like right there. When just doing the calculations early, I'm like, I don't know how they're gonna. At this point, I don't know how they're going to fit Eric Stahl in the lineup. Even if they want him, it really comes down to the financials, and someone else might be unfortunately screwed over in that case when it comes to this roster. And it's when we talked about taking a step back for this Panthers team, this is the fruits of their labor, the reaping what you sow, as far as where the Panthers stand. And it a little setback for a big comeback is what we hope to see for this team. But some growing pains will have to come around in the meantime. And that's where we stand with the Panthers. And of course, everything could change once game 1 happens, and if you go on a winning streak early to start the season, then we could go back and very well say that Bill Zito is a genius for everything that he's done. And I still think very well that Bill Zito knows what he's doing, and that he has a good sense of direction for where he wants to take this team, because he's going to continue to have a long leash. The Matthew Kuchak trade also said that, along with Paul Maurice. Paul Maurice is also going to have a long leash too with this Florida Panthers team. It's not a 1-year experiment. It's a 3 to 4 year experiment right now for this team and what they're investing in. So little bit of steps back that continuing for the Panthers. And this isn't going to be the last one this season for Bill Zito and company. When Anthony Duclair comes back, there's going to have to be a tough decision as well of what $3 million are you going to take off the roster to put Anthony Duclair back there in the Panthers roster. And these are the continuing difficulties that this front office is going to have to go through all throughout this season. But in the next segment, we're going to discuss the latest Mackenzie Weegar extension with the Calgary Flames that will pay him for the next 8 years. We're going to discuss him and Jonathan Huberdeau's, even though Jonathan Huberdeau signed a few weeks ago. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But now we are going to discuss our latest partner, which is Athletic Greens. And our next partner is something that I literally use every day, because I started taking AG1 because I needed to stop drinking so much coffee. I realized that drinking so much coffee actually increases my anxiety levels over a period of time. So I had to start by limiting the amount of coffees I would drink. But then the solution for me to, as far as energy, was AG1. And what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, aging, all the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition with just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Back on this second segment here on this Monday, October 10th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And we were wondering all throughout the summer whether the Calgary Flames were going to sign both Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar this offseason once they made that trade. And these are two teams who are forever, at least in the next 8 years, going to be connected with one another on who won the trade, who lost the trade. Was it a smart idea to keep this person under this cap hit? Is it a good idea to go younger? Is it okay to keep the guy who's been here since 2011, along with the guy who was the sixth to last pick in his draft in 2013? And now everything is done. Everything is done. Matthew Kuchak got extended right before even being traded to the Florida Panthers. Really, technically, the first sign and trade in NHL history. And Jonathan Huberdeau signed a few weeks ago, $10.5 million. It was always rumored that Mackenzie Weegar was going to get kind of like a Hampus Lindholm type of deal, 6.25 with the Calgary Flames. And that in itself combined, $16.75 million as far as their AAV. And right now with the Panthers sitting at 11 after extending Spencer Knight, and then if you were to pay both of them, again, Mackenzie Weegar was going to be a guy that was always going to be seen as a rental for the Panthers and then walk next offseason because of what he was going to command as a number one defenseman, which, listen, that money for Mackenzie Weegar as far as where he was drafted to moving up into ECHL all the way to the NHL, even getting some Norris votes. I want to say personally, honestly, for him, congratulations to Mackenzie Weegar on getting the bag. But as far as the Florida Panthers, they have continued to show why it was a good idea to make this trade for them, because in a flat cap world, it was going to be difficult for this team, and it was going to be continuously up the cap and not being able to reset and going into free agency with minor signings that was only going to hold your team back over the long haul. And this is where the Panthers are right now. And you know what? This freaking sucks. It sucks right now that the Panthers are as tight to the cap as they can be. Because, like I said last segment, you're risking losing Alexei Heponiemi and Lucas Carlson. Mostly Alexei Heponiemi, in my opinion. But you don't want to always be in that position. That's the thing. And luckily, that for the Panthers gives them an opportunity to get younger. And I've looked a little bit at the free agents coming into 2023. And defenseman, I saw Travis Sanheim of the Philadelphia Flyers, who's going to be a free agent coming this offseason for the Panthers. There's a lot of Panther fans on the internet talking about Calvin DeHaan, about how long he was on the market, and then the Florida Panthers not going after someone like him on a possible cheap deal, someone who's been around the game for a while as well. So the defense core is, not the strongest part of the Panthers lineup right now. The top pair, not a pair that I'm really worried about, but it's really. But the good news about the defense for the Panthers, it seems that even though Mark Stahl is a little older, that Brandon Montour, he really spoke about it last week, is that he was the guy last year who always had a different defense partner really every game, pairing up with the sixth or seventh defenseman. And for a guy who's been here for a few years now, I'm sure he wants that one consistent person on the other side. And this is also an opportunity for Montour himself with getting quarterback into power play and being on that second pair with a consistent partner now, this could be an opportunity for him to elevate his game. And he's not an expensive player on this roster neither. So there's still that chance for him to grow even more as a player. And that is the positive that I can take out of that, at least. But it's still going to be a little bit of a rough season as far as figuring out the bottom pair and whether Mark Stahl can actually consistently stay and play up to a second pairing minutes with Brandon Montour, because it looks like that maybe Radko Gudas could be slated in the third pair along with Matt Kierstead. And if Lucas Carlson gets clears waivers and is brought back, it could be a situation where they're together more. And it's funny because first day of practice, I spoke to Radko Gudas about Lucas Carlson, talking about, and he looks faster, more confident, stronger. Carlson just had a kid as well, just last week or 2 weeks ago. And there's a lot of questions, but not a lot of answers as of right now for this team. And of course, it'll be clear once 2 p.m. comes around as far as who clears waivers, and then 5 p.m. when they have the final roster. But there's still a lot of work to do for Bill Zito in the front office. They're going to be really busy just trying to fit everything and everyone. And that's where, but thankfully, as far as the future for this team, it's only going to be a 1-year thing as far as right now for the Panthers. And this is why Bill Zito did not sign Mackenzie Weegar, because you don't want to be here every single year. Just ask Vegas. Vegas is still going through their issues of being tight up against the cap and trying to shed so much salary. They traded Max Pacioretty for future considerations when they traded so much to get him. They didn't get much of a return for Marc-Andre Fleury when they traded him to Chicago last offseason. You don't want to be in a position where you're trading assets for future considerations when you traded so much to get players. You don't want to be there. You want that flexibility. And credit to Bill Zito. Credit to him for that. And it's going to take a year of, once again, growing pains for this team to try to get everything under the cap. And the trade deadline is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult for this team. I remember, if you guys listen to the crossover with Locked On Leafs, they asked me, what are the chances of the Panthers trading for Jacob Chikrin? And it's, at this point, it's too late for the Panthers to do it. If they would have tried that, if they would have tried making that trade, it would have been last trade deadline or this offseason. But the lack of flexibility and the lack of capital, Jacob Chikrin is not coming to South Florida. I'm 99.99% sure that it's not going to happen for the Panthers. And this is where you got to get creative for Bill Zito, at least right now. In the third and final segment, we are going to continue the discussion of the Hockey Canada investigation and what is the latest of sponsors pulling out and whether people are defending Hockey Canada or continuing to criticize them. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Monday, October 10th edition of the show. And as I'm recording, seeing updates from practices, Carver Hagee left practice early, came back out, talked to the medical staff and Paul Maurice, and he's staying on the ice for the Panthers. That's a That is from George Richards of Florida Hockey Now, reporting that. But let's get into continuing the conversation on Hockey Canada and everything that's going on. And if you've listened to episodes a few weeks ago on their investigations about everything from the 2008 World Junior Hockey Team to 2003, by the way, trigger warnings for anyone listening. If you have little ears in the car, just letting you know that this is a conversation of sexual assault and that topic. But the latest really is of the head of the board, Andrea Skinner, resigning. But just the comment that she made a few days ago when asking about trusting the CEO and the rest of the board to do the right thing, and then a response of who are you going to replace it with? And the answer, just listening to that, is there are so many people who care about the sport, especially in Canada. I've only been to Canada once in my life, but the one time that I did go there and how people love that sport, and of course seeing it on TV, listening to podcasts of especially 32 Thoughts, Daily Face Off, all the Canadian media members who cover the sport, and it's religion, kind of up there, and there are so many people who care about the sport that when Andrew Skinner came out and say, who are you going to replace with? Trust me, there are so many people who would want to be in that position to make an actual positive change for this organization. People want to play for the country, but people don't want to play for the organization. That's people want to, and that's a hard place for players to be, whether it's World Juniors, women's hockey, going to the World Championships, the Olympics, you name it. It's hard to want to wear the colors of the flag of the country that you are from, but of course the organization is the difference, and still wanting to keep the leaders but defending them. And of course in the testimony, I watched a little bit of a testimony from Andrea Skinner, and the person asking her the questions, I actually did not get the name of the person asking the question, was asking her, isn't change start with the leader? And then dodging questions and continuing to defend CEO Scott Smith of Hockey Canada, and also discuss, isn't it up to the board to decide who runs this, and continues to defend. And the amount of sponsors that have pulled out. Canadian Tire permanently ended their relationship. Scotiabank, TELUS, Nike, Hockey Nova Scotia pulled funds. Tim Hortons pulled funds. Mayors of Halifax and Moncton are speaking out against Hockey Canada. And this is where a lot of people have said enough is enough. And the message that you're sending, more importantly, to parents of kids, is telling them that we just care about money, and that they're not going to they're not telling parents that we're going to keep your child safe, because think about the amount of parents who are sending their kids away, and they might not be knowing what could be going on with their kids while they're away at all of these tournaments outside of their province. Is that the kind of, or if you're a parent, is that the kind of organization that you want to give your son or daughter to? I don't know. It's a very tough place to be if you're a parent that loves this game, wants to see your child succeed, but it's an organization, Hockey Canada, that doesn't love its players back. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also spoke about if they need to create an organization called Canada Hockey in order for players to have a safe place to play under, a safe organization to play under, excuse me, that he will do everything he can, as far as the statement that I saw, to hopefully make that happen. And he's speaking out on it as well. And we're seeing more of things come to light as far as players being brought out, as far as mistreatment of other players and misconduct. I mean, Bakersfield Condors, the AHL affiliate of the Edmonton Oilers, just fired somebody for sexual offense to a minor, and Ian Cole of the Tampa Bay Lightning was just suspended, barring an investigation from the team and the Tampa Bay. There's according to the Tampa Bay Times as well. So those things are starting to really come to light, and more of these things are really starting to really tell the truth. And that and there's an article uh about Wayne Simmons and Akeem Alou yesterday, by I believe the name is Scott Simmons, about trying to put Akeem Alou down, about saying, oh, if there's a person you want to look up to Wayne Simmons, not Akeem Alou, about someone who's persevered. And I'm like, and they wanted to talk about Wayne Simmons' longevity and his production versus Akeem Alou. And that's a red flag as far as where Simmons went for his criticism on Akeem Alou. And Akeem Alou also came out and spoke about how it's not going to divide us, it's going to bring us stronger together. And it's a problem. It's continuing to be a problem in this game, how it's just a mentality of just shut up and get on the ice, play, be unselfish, be there for the team, sacrifice everything. But the fact that we're abandoning feelings of people and well-being is just not okay. And it's continuing to be a mentality of, as far as the organizations, profit over people. And I don't know what's inside the minds of coaches and all when they see this happen to players. But do they, when they get in, when they get the group together and they see that someone's missing, do they, is it, and another player comes in, it's just like, oh, okay, next one. Is that their mentality? Is that what they're thinking? I hope not, because I know there's 20 plus players on a roster, but the well-being of each and every one of those people matter. Even if someone gets hurt to the point, emotionally or physically, to the point where they can't play hockey again, those players need to be checked up on, and those players need to make sure that they have a good well-being, not only for the game, but quality of life post hockey as well. And that goes for every sport too. That it's not just a hockey issue. But this is continuing, at least in this sport, to come out in the public, and the truth is starting to be shown. And the truth hurts. The truth is uncomfortable too. But in order to make change, and in order for change to happen, truth needs to come out, and being uncomfortable is also another thing that has to happen too. And I hope that Hockey Canada, I hope they learn from this. They haven't shown anyone that they have, but I hope that with Andrea Skinner's resignation, that more when it comes to Scott Smith and defending him, I hope that there's more of condemning him instead, because the change starts with the leadership for these organizations, and it starts up top, and it's and we just can't have this anymore in hockey, in society, in any sport. That just, you need to care about the well-beings of these people, and that's really what it comes down to. thank you guys once again for listening to this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Once again, another not a easy conversation to have, but a conversation that we have to have as far as the game and what's going on within the game outside of the not only NHL but the game of hockey in general. Like I said, we find out who clears waivers around 2 p.m. today, and we also find out the final roster today at 5 p.m. on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We'll be discussing who is going to make the team and who will not be on the team as well for the Panthers, and who will likely be starting the season in Charlotte for the Panthers / Checkers. By the way, I want to wish a happy Thanksgiving to everybody in Canada. I want to wish everybody a great holiday, and I hope that you guys take this opportunity to be around loved ones during this time. Thank you guys for listening. And in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Rodent. We'll be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on everything National Hockey League. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.